Now, to be honest, profit was not something which drove the landlord. His passion was in the development of medicine and herbal preparations, always with the goal of improving the well-being of the entities who lived in Personificadia. Chapter 22. Interesting, he thought. The worry that they may have to wait in order to secure a table settled down and relaxed until perhaps something more worthwhile may present itself to worry about. A friendly voice, belonging to a welcoming gentleman, greeted them with warmth and sincerity. "Come on in, welcome," said the affable owner of the one voice, and quite possibly the establishment. "Table for three, Fate?" he asked, and then showed them to their seats. "Drinks?" he inquired further, while pointing at the small drinks menu situated in the middle of the table. "Ooh, strawberry milkshake, you may," said the boy, licking his lips. "And for the gentleman?" inquired the stout owner. This is who he must be, deduced Evan, after watching the authority displayed by the clicking fingers that signalled that a vacated table should be cleared away and reset. "A cool glass of milk would be nice," Fate acknowledged. "And for you, sir?" was the polite question put to Evan. I'm not sure. Everything sounds so appealing. I need something to really quench my thirst. I'm parched. I've been on a hiking trip," he added sarcastically, glancing at Fate. "May I suggest our home-brewed lager? We grow all the ingredients ourselves," he said, and then pointed into the fields visible through the window behind Fate. In the fields at the back of the pub were the finest crops of malt, barley, and hops. Alongside the cereal crops were other plots, brimming with rows of carrots, cabbage, and a varied entourage of vegetables. Too small to be classed as an orchard, there were fruit-bearing trees with apples of many varieties, from coxes to pippins, and back again. There were cherry trees, some black, some red, and there were plums and pears basking in the setting sun. Woody was growing impatient, as his desire for the milkshake was growing stronger. He pointed at the barley and asked, "Is that the stuff you make lager with?" "Indeed it is, young man," replied the landlord enthusiastically, wondering how the lad knew such a thing. "Well, I'll try some of your lager then. Just a half will be fine," said Evan, not wanting to spoil his meal with tummy bloat. The boy was pleased that his ploy to hurry the man's decision had worked. All three sat and studied the menu while they waited for their drinks, which duly arrived after a few moments. "Ready to order some food now?" asked the landlord, after placing the drinks on the table. Once again, everything on the menu sounded so nice and wholesome that their decision was having trouble making its mind up. Woody's cheeks hollowed as he sucked at the milkshake, trying to force the thick strawberry pulp through a straw. He soon resigned himself to drinking it directly from the glass and placed the straw down on the table after first licking it clean. That's nice," proclaimed Evan, after gulping down half a glass of the golden liquid. Fate was the one who replied to the landlord's question, after first wiping away the milky white line from around his mouth. "We are spoiled for choice, really. Any suggestions?" "The set meal is always a popular choice, as it's a main course and a sweet for the same price as some of the specials." "That sounds most agreeable." After giving the contents of the set meal the once over, Evan and his young self nodded in agreement. As the landlord scribbled their order on his notepad, Woody looked out of the window. "What's that green stuff?" he asked, pointing to a patch of shrubbery situated beneath the shade of some walnut trees. "Herbs," replied the landlord proudly. pleased with the boy's interest in his horticulture. "I've seen some herbs in little jars in Nana's kitchens, and they don't look like that." "That's because the ones you've seen are cultivated and dried, whereas those are fresh herbs which grow wild." Woody looked at the landlord and then pointed at the embroidered shrubbery which decorated the right-hand side of his shirt. "Same as those," he substantiated. The landlord smiled at the boy's inherent observation. Then Woody turned his attention back to his milkshake, which for now held more interest than herbs to a young boy. The landlord walked back to the kitchen to place their order with the chef, wondering about the young boy's sudden knowledge of the herbs. Interesting, he thought, considering that he did not appear to instinctively know the difference between his grandmother's dried herbs and the fresh wild ones in the field when he first sat down. Evan raised his glass towards his mouth when something that the landlord had said about the price of the food gave Evans financial embarrassment a nudge. "Money? I've got no money. How am I expected to pay?" "It's my treat," Fate assured him. "Now drink your beer, and when the food arrives, I will order more drinks." "Thank you very much," said Evan. "Thank you," added the boy, eager to be included in the next round of drinks. Then, thinking about something which Fate had said earlier, that there is no such thing as something for nothing, he considered questioning him, but decided it would be wiser to keep quiet, at least until after the second milkshake. When the main course arrived, Woody wondered where the line of fat around the edge of the meat was that usually accompanied his Sunday lunch at home. He was pleased that he would not have to eat his meal while a small pile of cut-off fat nestled on the edge of his plate. Never having seen broccoli before, he wondered what the little green trees tasted like and popped one onto his plate to try it. Fate took hold of the gravy jug and proceeded to smother each meal in luscious, thick gravy. Woody's facial expression gave away the fact that something was not quite right as he inquisitively moved the gravy around his food with his fork. "What?" asked Fate. "There are bits in my gravy." "Mint sauce, young man. Try it." So he did. It tasted rather nice, and he wondered how many more culinary experiences he had missed out throughout his life due to being poor. He wondered whether Evan the elder's taste was as unsophisticated as his. He watched him place a full tree of broccoli into his mouth after first sprinkling it with black pepper from an electric grinder. He nodded knowingly to himself. After the main course had been eaten, the landlord, who Evan assumed was the owner, brought the desserts, a homemade date and walnut cake. As Evan picked up the end slice, he was surprised to see that he had actually picked up half of the cake and that there were only 2 pieces on the plate and not 3. "Oh no," the boy said to himself, feeling left out and disheartened. "Not another lesson. I shouldn't have mentioned that I have no money either." But his fear and disappointment was soon replaced by a piece of chocolate fudge cake that the landlord placed before him. "I thought you would prefer this, as the date and walnut cake contains a drop of rum." Again, Woody said, "Thank you," and smiled at the cake bringer. The boy was highly delighted with his chocolate surprise and picked his plate up to show the others. "Look," he teased, "I've got this, and you've got walnut and rum cake." Waving the plate of chocolate fudge cake beneath the nose of his older self, he continued with his tease. "Chocolate cake or boring date and walnut cake? Now, let me think. Which one would I choose?" Then he moved the plate towards the nose of Fate with the intention of teasing again. But as he moved the plate, he tilted it and the cake slid off. It fell onto the table and squashed out of shape a little, but before anybody had a chance to tell him off, he lifted the tablecloth and flicked the cake back onto his plate. Nobody told him off. Woody thought about how different the reaction would have been if he had dropped the cake at home in front of his father. He was glad that the old man had walked out on him and his mother that day. He looked at Evan and thought how well they had turned out, considering the start which they had been given. Evan noticed his young self observing him, thinking things, daydreaming, living in a world of his own. Aunt Margaret's words played in an almost forgotten memory. And then some similar words spoke into Woody's more recent memory. Living in a world of his own without any normal friends. Woody wondered if his aunt would have approved of the two friends whom he had exchanged his two regular pals for. As they sat relaxing, feeling full and content, the landlord came across and pulled out a chair. I'll sit with you a while, if you don't mind, seeing as how it's rather quiet. Yes, it's not as full as I would have expected, having tasted your wonderful food, said Evan. A lot of my regular customers are at home making preparations for tomorrow's hunt. Evan wondered what the hunt was all about. He wondered if it could possibly have anything to do with the sparkling spheres which they had seen earlier. Surely not. He saw the chance to inquire about the hunt and the spheres, two unknown components of the journey. But before he had a chance to ask, the landlord suggested that the travellers take a stroll in the field and look at all the different crops, seeing as the boy showed so much interest in the herbs and barley and the like. Oh, yes, that sounds good, agreed Woody, who was always eager to learn new things, except perhaps some of the lessons which fate was intent on teaching him. Evan inquired whether the landlord had always grown his own food. Good heavens, no. About 9 or 10 years ago, there was nothing out there but a big oak tree. Then one day, Shrewdness, a very discerning fellow, suggested to me the idea of growing my own fruit and vegetables. What happened to the oak tree? Inquired Evan. I paid Shrewdness a considerable amount of money to dig it up, saw it into pieces, and take it away. He paused for a drink of his own lager, and then continued. That's Shrewdness. He's an astute fellow. Somehow, after paying him to take away the tree, I ended up paying him to supply me with some young fruit trees. Then, as though I had not given him enough money, he somehow managed to convince me to buy back part of my original oak tree. How did he manage that? Evan just had to ask. He convinced me that I needed a new sign above the pub door. I must admit, though, it does look rather good, and I believe it helps to pull in passing trade. Now, to be honest, profit was not something which drove the landlord. His passion was in the development of medicine and herbal preparations, always with the goal of improving the well-being of the entities that lived in Personificadia. After another mouthful of beer, the landlord asked to be excused, as there was work to be done. Feel free to wander around, he called out, as he disappeared into a back room. Can we go and have a look at the fruit trees and herbs? Asked Woody keenly, for he had never seen cherry trees before. Evan found himself wondering if it was merely his environment that had ignited the boy's newly awakened interest in plants and the like, or whether there was another reason for his curiosity. Yes, of course we can, Fate assured him. Come on, before it gets dark. Do you mind if I stay here? Evan asked. I think I've walked enough for one day, he informed me, while rubbing the thighs that had wandered up and down the undulating road to right back to where I set off from. Thank you very much. Fate and the boy assured Evan that they understood and that they did not mind at all. Then Fate said, if you want another drink, get one and add it to my bill. Fate and Woody went outside to see the fruit trees vegetable plot and herb garden, leaving everyone to relax, or so he thought.